Have you ever heard the refrain, breastfeeding isn't free? I know I definitely have. I've seen it in lots of clickbait journalism posts about the difficulties of breastfeeding, which are really pointing to systemic barriers that make baby feeding hard, but tend to knock breastfeeding in and of itself without pointing to all the systemic barriers which make it hard for us to feed our babies human milk. The story I'm going to share with you today really highlights this refrain, that with so many barriers and so little help, that those of us who really do want to feed our babies and run into difficulty do have to invest so much of our own time, energy, and financial resources in order to get the help we need. And when we do that, there is no guarantee that we will get the outcomes that we so desire. I commend anyone who tried as hard as Natalie did to try to feed their babies human milk, and I can't wait for you to hear her stories. Enjoy. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. Having known only a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore the systemic medical and cultural barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult, so that you know your baby feeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
Yeah, so I'm Natalie. I have been born and raised in St. Louis. I met my husband, Sam, about 13 years ago now. We live in South City, St. Louis. We have two beautiful kids, my 2-year-old who just turned 2, and then we have a 5-month-old daughter. So yeah, it's been wonderful, and I couldn't ask for anything better.
That's awesome. And we connected because you were the host of a podcast.
Yes. So my sister-in-law,
well, the
Liz,
co-host.
Yeah. My sister-in-law, Liz, and I started a podcast last year in May of 2022 called the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. So we host a lot of birth stories from women. A lot of them have been our friends. And now we've kind of expanded and had people all over the US. So it's been wonderful. And then that's how you and I connected.
Yeah, that's right. I think I saw you in maybe a podcasting group and I thought, ooh, another birthy person. Let's hear from her and collaborate. Because birth and breastfeeding, they're so interconnected. And so most of the time, if somebody is interested in birth and all that happens in the birth process, then usually there is some sort of connection to baby feeding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love to hear it all.
Yeah, that's right. To as far back as you can remember, really, into your childhood, and have you think about your cultural upbringing and what your exposure to breastfeeding was as a young child, into your teen years, into your 20s, before you were even thinking about having a family. Did you see people breastfeeding? Was it a part of your everyday life, or would it have been unusual to see that?
Yeah, kind of a little bit of everything, honestly. I'm the 4th out of 5 children. And so my little brother was only 18 months younger than me. So any memories of him breastfeeding, I don't really have. I do know that my mom breastfed all 5 of us. But by the time that it got to me having children, I couldn't ask her questions because she passed away a few years ago. So I didn't really have her insight or input. My sister had her first baby when I was 10. And so I saw her breastfeed, and then she had my niece when I was 12. So I did see her breastfeed, and I was kind of just okay, that's just what she does. That looks cool. I do remember even when I was younger than that, I saw one of my mom's friends breastfeed her baby. And I think at first I was just oh, that's a boob. in front of me, but like it didn't, like nothing like really registered. I was kind of like, her baby's hungry. Nothing really, like, I didn't find it weird. I didn't find it unusual. I didn't really have like a lot of reactions, no negative, no positive. It was just kind of what I saw. And then knowing my mom did breastfeed and my sister made it feel more natural for me just because she was always feeding the babies around us. I guess that's really the only experience I had up until it was my turn to have babies. My sister-in-law, Liz, she wanted to breastfeed and like, she'll go into that, all of that. But that was really the first person I had that was the closest to me breastfeeding up until I had my babies. And her experience didn't go as planned. Once I like really got into birth I was probably around early 20s is when like my birth interest really started picking up. I wanted to become a doula. And I always just thought it was like the most beautiful thing. Once I turned 20, I like started to realize I thought it was like the most beautiful thing. It was the most natural thing. It's what I planned to do, what I wanted to do. And so when my husband and I had a baby, I was like, of course that's what I'm going to do. And it's going to be easy for me because I know my mom did it for all 5 of us and it was super easy for her. And it was super easy for my sister. There was never any issues for them. Yeah, that's just how I saw it going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that those of us who really want it to happen for us and expect it to happen and believe that our bodies can do it, sometimes it doesn't always go that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when we have these examples of people who were able to do it and we really do think, okay, I'm going to do this, because often the story is, I know so many people who weren't able to do it, so I'm probably not going to be able to do it. And so then we know, okay, that person's not going to be able to do it because they don't believe they can.
Yeah.
But when we truly believe we can, and then it still doesn't work out, that's that can be really sad. So when you said you were 10 and 12 when your sister was feeding her babies, and she did that with confidence, openly, wherever, whenever she needed to. That was her experience of feeding her babies.
Yeah, I don't have many memories of it ever being like a weird thing for me, or maybe even paying too much attention to it. Because my interest really ramped up when I was like early 20s.
Okay. So you get into your 20s, you want to be a doula, and that's before you even had your own children.
Yeah.
Okay. What sparked your interest in birth?
Yeah. I think just becoming an aunt so young. Because my sister and her baby lived with us for a while, up until my nephew, it's his birthday today. He's 20 now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So he's 20. They lived with us up until he was 1. And then when she had her next baby, when I was 12, they moved out with her husband to another city in St. Louis. So yes, I don't know what like immediately sparked my joy. I just always like, I know I want to have babies. I was a preschool teacher in college. I was just like, babies are a must for me. If I date a guy that doesn't want to have babies, see you later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. What kind of prep did you do for baby feeding, for breastfeeding in particular?
Yeah.
Anything?
So I think I should just like preface that during our vows, we were both like, my husband Sam said, the only thing that scares me is the number of babies you want to have. And I was like, I don't know who got this answer, but like people were saying I wanted like 5, 6 kids. I'm like, no. I want like 3 or 4. So anyway.
Anything beyond 2 is unfathomable, I guess.
Yeah. So he said that in his vows. So I just have to say that's hilarious.
That's really funny.
Preparing for breastfeeding, I had an amazing doula during my first birth with my son. She was wonderful. She breastfed for like 3 or 4 years, I think. So she really brought me like a lot of knowledge when it came to it. All I think I really prepared for was like a documentary, Ina May's book, And then like Instagram, any video I could find to like how for babies to latch, how for it to be most successful, I was pretty much doing. Like I was watching a ton of videos, YouTube, Instagram. Yeah, like those are my two main sources, and then my doula.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I've been talking to a lot of people about the types of prep that is helpful. And it really is hard to prepare until you have the baby in your arms. There's only so much you can do in advance.
Exactly, because you don't have a baby to practice with.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about what impact, knowing whatever you know about how birth can impact breastfeeding. Talk to me about your initial breastfeeding experiences, like the very first ones in the hospital, and what impact your birth experience, either negatively or positively, may have had on those first experiences breastfeeding.
I had a pretty great birth. Like I really didn't have many obstacles in my way. The only thing is like I had back labor. And so when I was trying to go unmedicated, I ended up getting an epidural and things went wonderfully. I pushed for like 30 minutes and he was out quickly. So when it came to like any experiences during birth that hindered breastfeeding, I didn't really have. So I think I just went right into it. Right after he was born, I was trying to latch him. And I was just like, it was also like 4-5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm just went through 15 hours of labor and I'm exhausted. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. How do I position him? Like all these videos that I had, I forgot them. They were just right out the window. So I had 2 nurses helping me and they were like, kind of sandwich your nipple and things like that. And I'm just like, I'm not catching on. But then we just kept going and it seemed like he was kind of getting there. But also at the same time, I was just like, I need sleep. If he gets cranky, can you guys just feed him formula? Because I was just like, I need to take care of myself right now. I had no problem with formula. Therefore, I was like, can you guys just feed him so I can rest? Like I delivered him at 3 a.m. So I was just like, I need rest. But I do remember I woke up like the first time and my midwife was there and was checking out my son. And my first question, I literally woke up, does he have a tongue tie or lip tie? Because someone close to me had that issue and that hindered their experience. And that was my first question when I woke up and they were like, no, he looks great. And I'm like, okay. And then she helped me breastfeed. And she was like, from what I'm seeing now, he has an A+ latch. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. This is going to be so great.
Did you feel like it was an A+ latch? Like how was it feeling to you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
From what I know now, no, it was not an A+ latch whatsoever. It never hurt, but my daughter had a much better latch than he ever did.
Okay.
For my son, his upper lip never went up. And, he has, my midwife told me right there, he has no tongue tie or lip tie. Well, present time, he's now 2. He has a huge lip tie. Huge. His upper lip can like not go up. And I'm like, oh, funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took him to a dentist, and I'm seeing it. I'm like, oh my God, that's huge. No wonder why his upper lip never went up. And whenever we did feed, I was just like soaked with milk because he never got a lot in his mouth.
Yeah. Did he have difficulty with weight gain?
No, not at all.
Okay. So he was transferring enough milk. He was gaining weight fine.
So yeah, he was transferring milk, but we were also bottle feeding and combo feeding.
Okay. From the very beginning.
Pretty much. Yeah. So like the first few nights home, we tried everything, like all the different routines we could do, for like sleeping. Cause my husband needs sleep. I need sleep. So we were like trying to stagger, like you get up, I get up, you get up, I get up kind of thing. But the first like few nights when my husband would get up with him, he would scream. And the only way that he would calm down is if I breastfed him. And so I'd breastfeed him. But then I was like, well, this isn't like sustainable for me. Like I'm not getting sleep. So I started to pump pretty early on, and I was super engorged. So that was really what was the only way that was like helping me. So I started pumping a lot. And then that way, when my husband got up with him, he could feed him a bottle. And this kid took any bottle. He did not care what the nipple looked like. He just knew that if it was food, he was good. So
Okay.
that's why there was really no trouble with weight gain.
Okay. He was taking a bottle and you would pump during the day to supplement what he would eat at night?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. I also like had a pretty great supply, like maybe an oversupply, but I don't know. But like those first few weeks, your body is just like trying to understand like your needs. And I was making milk like no problem.
Okay.
That part wasn't hard.
Okay. Yeah. So from the very beginning, you were pretty milky.
Yeah.
Okay. And did that slow down ever?
So once like 10 weeks hit, my breasts felt extremely soft. And that's when I went into pure panic. I was like, well, why are my breasts soft? Like, I know that they're supposed to, get full and feel hard. And then I pump and then like I'm good. And it just keeps going. I never knew that your breasts like regulate and you start to feel soft. There were just so many things that I missed. And I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, what the heck? So at the same time, it was like July of 21. He was about 10 weeks old. And we went to my husband's family's lake house and I started birth control that week. So I like just started my period. And then I went to go breastfeed my son and he completely rejected me. And whoa, that hurt. That one was a sting. And we were still like combo feeding. So like I had formula on hand. So like I wasn't worried about it. But that like really sent me into a downward spiral. I remember I called the midwife, like I'm not even pumping that much anymore. Sure enough, I was pumping fine, but I didn't know that.
When you say you were pumping fine, meaning your output was great, but you were comparing it to
before
unrealistic expectations or okay.
Yeah. Like, when I would pump when he was a newborn, I would get like 8 ounces.
Oh, wow.
Like a lot.
Uh-huh.
And then when I would pump when he was plus 10 weeks old, I would get like maybe 4 ounces total.
Oh.
And
that's so great.
Yeah. And I was thinking that's not enough. Like I was filling up both bottles. And I never knew about supply and demand. So I never knew that like if I missed a feeding session with him, like, or if he like got a bottle of formula or got a bottle of breast milk, I didn't know that I was supposed to pump. Yeah. And then I got on birth control and I was just like, well, that took away my supply. Looking back, it was probably because I was not doing supply and demand and my breasts were regulating at 10 weeks. I just had no idea about these things.
Yeah. Were there any IBCLCs that were available to you at the hospital or any private practice IBCLCs in your area that you could have reached out to get help? Or
I never saw a lactation consultant in the hospital. I was just like, I feel pretty good about this. Like, my midwife said I was an A+ latch. I feel good. I was going to a chiropractor and I took my son there too. And she was wonderful. Like she's breastfeeding her 4-year-old, I think. So she was a resource. And then she said that she partners with an IBCLC. And when I emailed that IBCLC, I never heard back. So I never did get any help surrounding that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's too bad. You never heard back after emailing. It's hard enough to like go through the motions to reach out to somebody when you're in the postpartum period. And then when somebody doesn't.
Yeah. So I never did get any support surrounding it. After I called the midwife, I was pretty much doing everything I could. Like I was buying into like those cookies, then milk, and all the little teas I could find. I was doing the lactation balls. Like I was doing everything I could to increase my supply back up to the original 8 ounces I was pumping, no problem. But I just didn't know about these things.
Yeah. And it sounds like you were okay with combo feeding. So it's not like you needed, 100% breast milk. But if you had somebody to come and do a 90-minute session with you and say, okay, so what is your ideal ratio if you need to sleep fully through the night and you're not going to be pumping on a 24-hour clock, what would you like your ideal amount of breast milk to be? Let's set up a pumping schedule for you based on that. Let's do a phalange fitting because that can really impact your milk output. Let's make sure you're using paced bottle feeding. That way he's not overeating what you're producing. There's all these things that somebody could have really walked you through so that you were optimizing the amount of milk you were making, even if you were supplementing with formula, because a lot of people have to make that choice in a time when it's all us all the time between sleep and full breastfeeding or full breast milk. But you can still optimize the amount of milk you're able to produce if you have the right information.
Yes. Yep. And I'm not trying to blame anyone here. I just didn't know these things.
Right. But why would you know?
Exactly.
Why would you know?
Exactly.
Right. And it's a failure of the system. It's no one individual provider's fault, but it is a systemic failure that this is a story. You were really into birth and you were into babies and you wanted to breastfeed from a young age, yet even you did not have the information that you needed to meet your goals because we don't have enough providers and we don't make the right referrals to give people the help that they need. I try to encourage people, other providers. I have stopped saying, yeah, that looks great. I will tell people, wow, you look very relaxed. Your shoulders look good. How are you feeling? And I will point out the things that I'm noticing. Oh, I notice your baby has a really wide open mouth, or I'm noticing baby's mouth is really narrow right now. But I never say the latch looks great, because the only person who can say whether or not the latch feels great is the person who's experiencing the latch. And we take away other people's self-efficacy when we begin to say whether or not the latch is good. And so I always like to ask my clients, how do you think that feels? What are you noticing? What are the sensations you're feeling? And sometimes just saying that enough, they'll be like, it might feel a little chompy, or I don't know, the suction keeps stopping. Because, when that upper lip doesn't phalange, the suction won't be quite as fantastic as with a great latch, for instance. And so you can give people the language to be able to name how it sounds without telling them it's great or not great. But, midwives, they are great. I love midwives. I work with a lot of midwives. They aren't trained. They're more pro breastfeeding than other providers, but they also aren't explicitly trained in breastfeeding. So they have learned a lot about breastfeeding over the years. They have some training in breastfeeding, but they don't have the extensive training that, say, an IBCLC does. Now, can they help people to latch their babies and get them started? Yes. Are they specifically trained to identify tongue tie? No, they are not.
Yeah. And I'm finding a lot of people actually aren't, even pediatricians.
Right. No, they're not. No, it is not a part of their training. I have a really busy week coming up, and I thought, what better way to reduce my stress than to go onto feastandfettle.com and order meals for that week so I can just take one thing off of my plate by putting delicious meals onto my plate. See what I did there? So I went on to their website. It's really easy to use. I looked at all of the menu options for the week, and some of the things I'm excited about are some grilled steak tips with a delicious Thai peanut sauce and some green beans with a soy sesame sauce that's on the side. But there's so many other things. And that is one of the ways that I am choosing to provide self-care for myself so that I can reduce my stress load. If you would like to do the same and spend more time with your family and less time worrying about what's for dinner, go to feastandfettle.com to get home cooked meals delivered right to your front door. And you can get $30 off your first week's delivery by using my code MILK, MILK. And just let somebody else cook for you. You won't regret it. If you're listening to this podcast, then you are more than aware of all the barriers that can make feeding our babies so difficult. You are also more than aware that support can make all the difference. So if you are struggling to feed your baby in the way that you had hoped, or if it is more stressful or anxiety inducing than you had anticipated, then what are you waiting for? I am here for you. Go to my website, www.quabbinbirthservices.com. I can't wait to connect with you. I can help you take the next right step in your baby feeding journey so that you feel less anxiety and get more joy out of those moments when you are feeding your baby. I can't wait to hear from you. Talk to you soon. So you have to ask, actually, because people can take additional training if they are interested, but pediatricians only get 3 to 9 hours total of breastfeeding education in medical school.
Oh, wow.
That does not include tongue tie training. Yeah. So even IBCLCs, we have to decide we want to become trained in tongue tie education in order to get that education. And so you really, even when you're looking for an IBCLC, you want to check that, hey, are you tongue tie savvy? Have you sought out that specific training? The same with pediatric dentists. It's interesting that MDs, specifically pediatricians, will just say, oh yeah, your baby has a tongue tie or your baby doesn't have a tongue tie, when they have not done all the work to understand how it impacts breastfeeding, because the right way to identify tongue tie is really not just by what you visualize, but by the symptoms. Often it's nipple pain, it's babies that are slow to gain weight, or sometimes they are gaining weight fine, and so then they're ignored, but they might be gaining weight well because the mom has copious amounts of milk. But then you might have signs of, like, they might be diagnosed with reflux, or they might be diagnosed with allergies. So you might have frothy poop. You might have a baby that's constantly breastfeeding. They might have lots of night wakings. They might be really, they might wake frequently for, every hour, every 2 hours to feed. That's part of tongue tie. Difficulty with pacifiers, difficulty with bottles is sometimes part of tongue tie. Yeah, there's a lot of symptoms and often somebody will get diagnosed with allergies, but the only way to really know if there are allergies is if there's blood in the stool. And so sometimes people would get diagnosed with allergies when it's actually tethered oral ties.
Yeah. Well, so I guess I did end my journey with my son when he was about 3.5 months old, just because I thought all these things were going against me. And so about August, I was just like, I'm throwing in the towel, and it was okay. Like I had a hard time, but I also did not have a hard time with it. It was just better for our family, and he was just doing great. So anyway, I ended up getting pregnant when he was 13 months old, and I was so excited to breastfeed again. I was like, if anything's going to go my way, it's going to be breastfeeding. I was determined. I even did more research. Like, I'm going to just be honest, Instagram was like my main source because people are always posting everything. So I was like, okay, save. I felt really, really, really confident going into it. Sure enough, I had my daughter in January of this year, and she latched like that. Like I would probably say 5 minutes after she exited my body, she was on my boob, and I could tell it felt good. Like I never had any nipple pain. I mean, just like the first few, like 2 or 3 days, because she was cluster feeding. She would cluster feed in the hospital for like, one time she was on my nipple for over an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, that was the only time I felt like it really hurt, just because, you know, my nipple was constantly wet in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it just really felt sore. When we got home the first night, I tried to give her a bottle of formula to hopefully maybe have her sleep a little longer. And she was kind of just like spitting it out a lot. Wasn't really interested in it. Just a lot of like, I don't know what this is. But she never cried. She just, kind of didn't like it. And so I was like, okay, no worries. We'll try again later. After about a week, we tried again. And it was my breast milk this time. And she like did not like it at all. She like just kept spitting it out. It was my husband that was trying to give it to her. She cried. She really pushed it away from us. And so we were kind of just like, okay, maybe that's not the one. She was about a month old at the end of February, and my aunt came to town to help us out and just, see the kids. The first night that she was there, all of a sudden, like 5 o'clock hit, and my daughter went like no stopping to her cries. And I was like, oh, it's just like got to be the witching hour. And so we were pretty much just like passing her off. My aunt, myself, and my husband, we were just like passing her off to see if like anybody could stop her from crying. And my aunt just kept making these comments like, she's really like tightening her stomach. Like, what's going on? And I was just like, I'm not accepting that she has a food allergy. I'm not going to accept that. Like, just because she's tightening her stomach, that could mean so many different things. Like, it's not my milk that's hurting her. And yeah, she was just saying that a lot. And I was just like, no. So after that, my husband and I like immediately took her to my chiropractor, seeing if like that would help. They immediately noticed that when she was feeding, her latch would kind of break off. So she was always like a really noisy eater. And I was like, well, what's that gotta be? And then by early March, she was completely rejecting a bottle, screaming, crying. If it was breast milk, if it was formula, if it was a mixture, she would not touch it and would like scream at me or my husband, like whoever was trying to give it to her a bottle. I remembered this girl I follow on Instagram who's local to St. Louis, had an amazing IBCLC through one of our hospitals who has like a feeding clinic. And I was like saving that. And so I remember she, gave me the info, and I reached out to them and made an appointment, and it was covered through insurance. Like, how amazing. Finally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so it was like a feeding clinic through one of our hospitals, and they were like OTs plus IBCLCs. And so I took her there, and they did like a weighted feed, the first thing. And they're like, well, yeah, no wonder she doesn't want the bottle. Like, you just gave her 3 ounces in 7 minutes. Cause my letdown was so fast. I never felt letdowns. Just one of those people. And then we try with the bottle, and I'm like, well, why are we trying with the bottle after? Like, she just had a full feed. Like, she's not going to take the bottle if she's not hungry. And then she ends up taking a bottle just fine for this IBCLC. Just fine. And we're like, what did you do? And like, they were, pacing her. So I did, I was holding her upright. They gave her a different bottle that we did not try yet, because we were like trying every bottle that I ever knew. They gave her Lanzano. And then they sized up her nipple size like to like a level 4. And then I was like, I think that's too much. We're going to size back down. And so they gave her a level 3, and it was still a little too much. Oh, so then after that, in like mid-March, they were like, well, why don't you do a weekend of bottles during the day, breasts at night? And I was like, okay, we can try that. We're going to be home. We're not doing anything. We'll try it. And it was like the Saturday. It was like the first day. And she took the bottle all day from my husband. I was at home. Like, it was no problem. It was great. And then she did breast at night, still did fine. And then by Sunday, she was rejecting the bottle again.
Mm.
And I needed her to take a bottle because I'm a working mom and I had plans to go back to work. So that's why that was where the push came from.
Yeah.
And after that, I went to Kansas City to visit my aunt and uncle. And my husband didn't come with us because he had to work. And so I took myself, my son, and my daughter. And my daughter was 2 months old at this time. And so, I just was like, I brought a bottle, but I'm like, I'm not going to really use this. I'm just going to breastfeed her because, supply and demand that I finally knew about. So once we were there, I saw one of my best friends who's a labor and delivery nurse. And I was just kind of telling her like my struggles of like not taking a bottle. She was very cranky, always just lots of crying. And she was like, honestly, I think she has a tongue tie. And I'm like, are you serious? Another thing stacked against me. Like, I wasn't expecting to hear it. The feeding clinic person we went to never said anything about a tongue tie or lip tie. So, I did not think anything of it. And so once we got back to St. Louis, I made an immediate appointment with our pediatrician. And it was the worst appointment ever. Like,
oh no,
they didn't sound like they knew anything that was going on. And my pediatrician, like, I love her, but she talks really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like telling me like what I could do, but it's like a posterior tongue tie where like she wouldn't necessarily clip it, but like other people might, like you might want to take her to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. I'm just like, I don't know where to go next. Anyway, when I took her to my chiropractor's office, like probably a few weeks beforehand, I ran into like an acquaintance and she was just like telling me her journey. She was there to see this feeding clinic who is their IBCLCs, like fully trained in this stuff. And I reached out to her on Facebook Messenger and I was like, hey, like, can you share your experience? And she's like, yeah, he has, my son has a tongue tie. He had a really hard time gaining weight. Pretty much every like symptom that we just talked about, like he had. And I was noticing that there were a lot of symptoms my daughter was having too. So I'm like, okay, she's got to have a tie. We'll try to go to this feeding clinic to get the ties cut so then she can take a bottle better. Because my whole time was like, she was breastfeeding just fine, which I wanted. Mm-hmm. But I had for her to like go interchangeably because I had to go back to work.
Right.
So then I went to this feeding clinic and they're like, yep, she definitely has a tongue tie and lip tie. But her cradle cap is really bad. Like, what do you eat? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, cradle cap is connected to an intolerance of something. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, another thing that I had no idea about. It just always felt like it was like 5 steps forward and 20 steps back, And I'm emotional because it was just like, it was 2 months ago that we were going through all this.
Of course. Yeah. Who wouldn't be emotional?
Yeah. And it was brought back up today because I went to a baby and me yoga class and all these moms were like having a wonderful time and they were breastfeeding there. And I'm just like,
yeah.
Yeah. My experience just was like brought back up today. So it's kind of funny I'm coming on here today.
Yeah.
Anywho, they were like, maybe you should eliminate eggs because you're saying you eat a lot of eggs. Maybe like try eliminating eggs for a little bit. And I did. And the cradle cap subsided a little bit. Her poops smelled horrendous. They smelled like rotten eggs. So I was like, okay, she's allergic to eggs. Whatever, I'll cut them out. I can do that for her. And this feeding clinic was not covered by insurance. And I do not have a paid maternity leave. And so it was a lot of money out of pocket. And, I was trying to do like a bottle a day, but my husband's working and I'm at home with the baby. Like, what else am I going to do? I'm just going to lift up my shirt and I'm going to feed her. Like, that's what she
Right.
wants. So, there's no problem. And then sure enough, like I went back to the feeding clinic and she took a bottle just fine in front of the feeding clinic person. I was like, how can you take a bottle in front of them? No problem. But for me, it's like, I'm like trying to choke her or something. Like, I don't know. It's just funny how she could like do that. Switch it on and off.
I know.
After we went to the feeding clinic, they were like, I think it's time. Just keep up with these exercises in her mouth. I think it's time that we do cut them. Here's like a really great chiropractor. My husband is actually like old friends with a chiropractor who like specializes in all of this stuff. And so I was texting with her and I'm like, before I spend, an arm and a leg on seeing another specialist, like, what do you think? And I was like telling her all these symptoms and she's like, trust your mom gut. We really didn't like get to a solution, but I did end up taking a picture of her when she was crying and I sent them to the chiropractor and she's like, yeah, she definitely looks like she has a tongue tie, lip tie, maybe some buccal ties. I'm like, oh my gosh, what?
Were they expecting the chiropractor? Were they just wanting the chiropractor to do body work before the frenectomy, or what? Why were they sending you to the chiropractor?
Yes, pretty much body work, as well as like gas.
And was anybody referring you anywhere to actually do the frenectomy to release the tethered oral ties?
Yeah. So with the podcast back in October, my sister-in-law and I went to this thing called Babies and Bumps in St. Louis. They kind of like travel around the US, but we had a booth there and then we connected with the pediatric dentist. And so, my friend, my acquaintance who I texted, she sent me to one of like the top recommended places for the frenectomy. And I ended up hearing back from this person like a week later. And then I was like, I'm just going to hold off on you. I'm going to go to the feeding clinic first and see what they say. And then I called the pediatric dentist that I connected with at the Babies and Bumps. And she was like, I'm working on getting this. Like, I actually am like partnering with the feeding clinic you're going to. So like, if we can just wait a few weeks, we'll get you in and we'll get that cut. So I'm like, okay, sounds good. So yes, the feeding clinic and then the pediatric dentist that was getting like a laser in, they were starting to partner and they had me set for like early May to get the tongue tie cut or lip tie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
After a while, I really don't know when things kind of just switched, but it was early May. It was like May 5th. I was literally set to go back to work on that Monday. And it was a new job, to be honest. But I ended up calling them and I'm like, I can't do it. I can't start. I am not confident leaving my daughter. She won't take a bottle. I'm having like a lot of anxiety around this. Like, I just can't do it. And so I didn't take the job. After that, we got COVID in May. And it kind of just seemed like the eggs weren't cutting it. And there might have been dairy. I reached out to the acquaintance again. I'm like, do any of your kids have food allergies? And she's like, yes. The one that we've been talking about, her youngest son does. And I'm like, what are you experiencing with that? And I'm like, I don't know if I can cut another thing out. Like, dairy is a lot in my diet. So like, I was just like, I'm not ready to cut this out. Anyway, my husband kind of got in his head that sure enough, there was like a dairy intolerance. And yeah, after when we had COVID, she was like, she screamed for like 2 days straight. And we're like, could that be COVID? Could that be a dairy intolerance? We don't know. After a while, I think I was just like, I think she's allergic to dairy. And my husband was really kind of pushing me to like make the switch. And yeah, after a while, we made the switch. So she's officially been bottle fed for about a month and a half. And my mental health has been a lot better, but it's also like today, everything was brought back right in front of me when like I saw all these moms breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And now she's a bottle fed baby. And I'm like, how did we just go through the last few months like this?
Yeah. She had so much trouble and then suddenly it was fine.
Yeah.
Well, the deal is I am not Heather's IBCLC. I'm not your IBCLC.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I listen to people's stories, I do listen with a clinical mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I also am aware that each person who is making decisions about their babies are doing so all of the best knowledge that they can garner.
Mm-hmm.
And they are making each right next step as it comes.
Mm-hmm.
You paid out of pocket for a lot of support and tried to get all the right answers. And in the end, what you needed to do was switch to soy formula for your own mental health, for that of the health of your family. We can't know for sure whether or not her symptoms were the result of tongue tie or the result of dairy allergies. But if you took that out and now her symptoms are resolved, then you can pat yourself on the back and say, I made the best choice I could given the information I had and the support that I had available to me.
Yeah.
And that's all any of us can do when we're making
Yeah.
decisions for our kids.
That's true. Yeah. Thank you for letting me see it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all put in these many of us are put in these difficult situations when we have struggles feeding our babies. And it can be so hard when you go to one person who says it's XYZ and you go to another person who says it's XYZ and you go to another person who says it's XYZ and insurance doesn't always cover it. And you want the very best for your baby,
mm-hmm.
and you want the very best for your family. And in the end, you do just have to look inward and say, what do I need to do in this moment?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of different people, I can't even tell you how many appointments we went through.
It sounds like so many.
Yeah. And then now the soy formula, boy, that's not cheap.
No, it's not. You know, I just want to name for you that what you just described sounds so challenging. Your son was 13 months old when your daughter was conceived, and then to go from one breastfeeding experience that was cut short that you said you felt fine with, you know, and that's, you know, it's okay for both to be true that it was cut short and you felt okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second to feel like I'm going to get this right. And then to have so many roadblocks come in your way.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say I'm sorry that the system failed you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think the funny thing is like this time, I was so obsessed with time. I remember I counted down to the day of like when my journey stopped with my son. And I was like, I am almost there with my daughter. I am so close to beating this. I'm so close to making it 4 months. And we like stopped like at the exact same day.
Yeah. Wow.
I know.
You did.
They were like both exactly like 3.5 months. It was like 3 months and like 16 days. And I'm like, I'm so close. Like I'm 2 days away from beating it. And then I was just like, this is it. Like we're done.
Yeah. 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 Well, now that you aren't making all the appointments and trying to do all the problem solving and figure out why your daughter is struggling, has that freed up some brain space for you and some energy?
Absolutely. Her sleep was terrible when she was breastfed. And I don't know what that was about, but now that she's formula fed, like she's sleeping so much better. I will just say like overall, like she's been a more challenging baby, but it's okay. I still love her. Like she's so beautiful. She's making me laugh. She laughs at her brother all the time now. So my mental health has significantly increased immediately, which is like really what I needed. Like I was close to getting on medication, which, I don't have a problem with medication, but I was like there because my mental health was so bad because I was so focused. And I kept saying to people, I'm okay if she's okay. Like I can't say that. Like she's a baby. She cries for different needs and I have to figure that out. And I can't put, my energy and my spirit onto like what she's feeling. You know what I mean? And now I'm out of that and I'm hearing myself say that again. And I'm just like, why did I say I'm okay if she's okay?
Wow. Well, those are two very different and difficult stories. I thank you for trusting me and sharing them with me. And I'm sorry that the second experience in particular was as difficult as it was. You tried so hard. So before we close out, I would like for you to share a little bit about the Golden Hour podcast and maybe a couple of your favorite episodes that you've had on and where people can find you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so the Golden Hour Birth Podcast, we're available on all the platforms where you listen to your podcasts. We have had such a wonderful year of birth stories. We've also had a doula on. We actually just had my husband recently on.
Oh, I think I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun.
Like a Father's Day kind of special.
Yeah. It was released exactly on my 30th birthday, which I found funny, but it was recorded like when things were terrible with my daughter's like feeding journey.
Oh.
So now I just want to tell our listeners, we're out of that dark phase. And yes, so you can find me on Instagram at Nat_Golden Hour. My sister-in-law is at Liz_Golden_Hour, just a little different. You can find us on Facebook at the Golden Hour Birth Podcast and then online as well. And my favorite stories, we had Alyssa Alter on, and she's from New York, and she is a comedian. She does stand up, and she was hilarious. Her birth story was not the greatest. She had a 4th degree tear, but she saw the light, and she made it funny. She's a comedian now. That's what she does. And then we also had a mom on, Nicolette. She had a splenic aortic aneurysm and almost had a near-death experience, as well as her son. And her journey and just everything. She's a wonderful storyteller. She's a wonderful human. And I just feel so grateful that she opened up to us and shared her story. And just how many people out there actually have had something like that, like the AFE, amniotic fluid embolism, the splenic aortic aneurysm, like such scary things. But it's so amazing hearing those survivor stories and just the strength that people have and how they can turn it around into something positive and help others really just warms my heart in so many ways.
Amazing. Awesome. We'll link both of those shows that you mentioned in the show notes so people can find them easily.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. This was a delightful conversation, and I was so happy to get to hear your stories today.
Thank you, Lo. Have a good one.
Each one of us are trying to just make the next right step for ourselves and for our families. And for all of us, when it comes to our lactation journeys and our parenting journeys, that might lead us down a different road, and that's okay. Some of us have the time, energy, and financial resources to try to figure out each problem as they arise when it comes to breastfeeding and human milk feeding, and some of us don't in that moment. And that's okay. Some of us have the time, energy, and financial resources to do it for a few months, and our situations resolve as a result, and we are so glad that we invested in trying to problem solve. And some of us try for a few months and then decide, you know what, I'm not getting to the bottom of this and it's time for me to make a different choice. And some of us, once we come across difficulty that stems from so many systemic barriers, decide from the beginning that we just don't have the time, energy, and financial resources to invest. And that's okay too. And I'm here to tell you, as an IBCLC, as a human milk-making advocate, and also as a person who advocates for healthy moms and healthy families in the postpartum period, who sees all the barriers that make human milk-making difficult, whatever choice you make was the right choice for you in that moment. And there's no room or place for guilt when it comes to feeding our babies. There's just making each right next step. And speaking of each next right step, don't forget to check out feastandfettle.com to get $30 off your first week of delicious home cooked meals delivered right to your front door. My family's really been enjoying them, and I hope that your family can too. So go check that out and see if you can get one more thing off your plate and enjoy these long summer days with your family if you're listening in the summer. And with that, can't wait to talk to you soon in my Milk Making Minutes community group, on one of my social medias, or elsewhere. Talk to you soon. Bye.